Bill. Bill currently designs and teaches at the Australian National University's Arabic and Persian languages online program, and is Young Australians in International Affairs 2015 Indo-Pacific Fellow. In 2014, he graduated with first-class honours and the Tilliard Prize in Arts and Asian Studies from the Australian National University. He formerly worked at the Australia Arab Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the Chamber of Commerce's Productivity Unit, and the Australian Senate Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade. He writes on the politics, economics and history of the Middle East, South and Central Asia, and Australia's outlook on the Indian Ocean. Let me begin. My first question to the panel is this, and I might ask, I think Will might be the first person to give us a response, but we'll invite others from the panel to follow. We spend a lot of time discussing leadership in our modern society, but I've always thought that leadership is something personal and distinct to every person and time or place. Will, what does leadership consist of, and what does it mean to you?
Well, I will start then. So thank you very much, Scott, and really good to be up here. I think leadership is, as you said, something that we do discuss a lot. It's a word that's thrown around a lot, but it's often quite a nebulous and a slippery concept, I think. And so even though we often speak about it, I think it's something quite difficult to put your thumb on. And that's where today and tomorrow in particular, I think there's a lot of value in having this chance to explore how it might operate in different spheres and how it operates for different people in different ways at different times. But it's always struck me, on the few occasions where I've had the chance to think about it, that leadership really comes through, and it has to be in both ideas and with people. One without the other is quite useless. It's important to have ideas and to be lateral thinking and to have broad horizons, but also that doesn't really go that far unless you can pull people along with you and mobilise people to get behind it and push for it. So, as you said, Scott, it is personal. I think everyone has their own understanding of leadership, but it operates in different ways, and in many ways it's social as much as it is personal. So, those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Rosemary, some questions of Bill now. When I introduced Bill, I didn't mention how well travelled he was and how many different languages that he spoke. But he has studied other cultures and languages, and he's travelled some unusual parts of the world by today's standards, including Iran, parts of the Arab world, and perhaps Pakistan and India as well. Given that, Bill, and from your experiences and sort of having an intimate understanding of different cultures, what does that? How does that inform you, and what does that make you think about Australia's place as a leader in the world?
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, it's a very, I think, a very interesting question. We often forget that we do have our own culture in Australia, and that came up in an earlier talk by Mr. Howard, actually. But first, I'd like to go back to when I was 17. I went to Yemen, which I think is probably an unusual thing to do. You said unusual countries. I went to Sana'a, Yemen when I was 17 years old to study Arabic there, and also just to immerse myself and learn a bit more about other places, other ways of seeing the world, other people. And that has driven me further for a want of understanding. That's, I think, really crucial in that we spoke of awareness and being aware of other cultures and other people and the way that they interact. The languages they speak. Australia is a particularly multilingual, unilingual country, in fact, when a lot of other countries are not. And that's something that we definitely need to bear in mind. And the idea that we have a single monolithic culture here as well is another thing which is really brought into a different perspective when you travel more and you spend time in places like Iran or Yemen or Syria, where I've also been. But it brings home the lesson that people are really what pulls things together as far as leadership. The leadership can be individual, it can be social, but it is also international. And again, Australia sits in an interesting place in the world. We've often felt like we're sat in splendid isolation, which we quite liked for a long time. But the world's not that small anymore. I mean, a 17-year-old Australian going to Yemen is not what the world used to be. So it really begs the question, where do we sit in the world? I think the Indo-Pacific concept is a really crucial one, that we've completely forgotten about our western flank for a very long time. Most of our trade comes through the Indian Ocean. We rely on it that way, but we continue to be stuck in an East Coast mindset in many ways in the way that we interact with the world. And so an awareness not only of other people and other cultures and other ways of doing things, but also what I learned from going over and spending time studying in Iran long term and studying in Lebanon long term as well, is that when you're aware of these other cultures and different ways of seeing things, you actually come around to confirm certain things about your own culture and about your own way of doing things, as well as understanding what doesn't work in your own way of doing things. So awareness, as much as with feminism or other issues in our own society, we need to be aware of where we sit more broadly. And that I think largely comes from an openness and a lateral thinking. When you're aware of things, you get new ideas. And again, that's where Australia really shines. I think we shine when we take up what has been Australia's way of doing things, which is a dogged low-gear idealism. That's where we really shine in the world. And that's when we are true to ourselves, we know what we stand for, but we're also very much more open to what's out there in the world. So again, it comes down to, I think, ideas which come from awareness of other places and also understanding other people and knowing how to mobilise yourself and others to achieve what you want to.
So is Australia a global leader?
Only when we're at the top of our game. I think middle power is a term that's thrown around a lot. For instance, I don't think we're a middle power unless we're really focusing on it. And we have been, and we can be. So Australia, we have been an innovator in ideas. I mean, beyond the Hills hoist, we've come up with a lot of other good things as well. And that extends into ASEAN, into our constructive role in the Asia-Pacific and hopefully also in the Indo-Pacific. So, and also in more multilateral organisations where we have pushed for things, often which we don't know about. One thing that interests me and that reminds me is that we actually took up Iran's case following the Iran-Iraq war with chemical weapons that no other country did, and that's something that Iran remembers. And one reason why we are one of the few Western countries to have continuing relations with Iran and a good trade relationship, actually. So remembering these kind of things, the lessons of history as much as the way that we're going forward can really help us galvanise things. And
it's been quite a journey. I realise that we've heard lots of different issues that have come up, lots of personal opinions and lots of really interesting and well-considered thoughts. I'm very happy to ask the panel to answer any questions that you might have at this particular point in time, given that we've got sort of 10 minutes or so left. So is there any questions that anyone would like to ask any members of the panel?
Hi, my name's Lucy. I'm from the University of Canberra. As Australia, we all know that we have a lot of diversity in cultures in Australia, but talking to other students at the university, I've noticed that not everyone actually understands different cultures apart from their own. So my question is, with all the issues that were raised about age and gender and needing diversity in leadership, do you think that cultural diversity management programs to educate future leaders and current employees, do you think they actually help in actually understanding the need for diversity?
Anyone like to add?
Yeah, I'll add one or two things. I'll probably take a slightly beyond just the programs.
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely essential that we think of culture actually, especially in the multi-ethnic and diverse society that we have in Australia now. I mean, we've spoken about the F word, feminism. Two other taboos which we don't deal with in our own society often are class and culture. We're not comfortable with those at all in Australia, and that's largely because we just don't like thinking about it. we're not comfortable with it, and I would say that, all the research suggests, even as far as pure productivity outcomes, diversity, when it's engaged, is a great thing. It's a real thing that we can harness for economic and social cohesion. I think that we need to, speaking about awareness earlier, we need to remember that there are other things such as class and culture as well, which do impact how society functions and where we're going as well.
Now, I have a question for the panel. I would be really interested to hear, and I'm sure everyone would, where do you draw your role models of leadership from? And name some names, give us some examples.
I'll start.
Off you go, Brooke.
First, I think it doesn't sound a bit cliche, but my mum.
Yeah, for me, it's same. It's my mum.
I agree with these guys, my mum, but also...
Thank you, Sarah. Bill?
As much as I love my mum, I am going to go a little bit out of left field. I do love my history, so I'm going to jump back to two characters who, particularly for me, are very interesting. I think a former British Prime Minister, William Ewart Gladstone, who was a Liberal Prime Minister of the UK in the Victorian era, and he brought about a huge number of reforms. He nurtured the all sorts of things, the union movement, fiscal responsibility, all sorts of different things that became the mould for how liberal democracies work now across the board. And it was really, in many ways, it was the idea that he was strong as a character, but he also brought all these ideas to the fore. Another, just briefly, would be, I think, John Curtin, actually, who obviously was Australia's wartime Prime Minister in World War II. He gave his life at the end of it, but his decision to turn around Australian troops to bring them back to defend here, rather than sending them off to the Middle East to fight for the Empire, was something that I think speaks a lot. So.
Good, thank you. Jess?
I think my family played a big role in it as well.